the high god of thunder that fought, Rose no longer hesitated and decisively left. While flying away, for some reason, he would repeatedly turn his head to look at Han Hao. As soon as Rose saw the raider escape, she went after him. Han Hao, with the bone spear in his hand, also went after the high god raider. When he was overtaking Rose, he said to her, "You stay, I chase." Rose stared blankly for a moment, and her first thought was to ignore Han Hao's words. But when she took a careful look and noticed that Han Hao looked rather similar to that someone, she immediately complied. Although her mouth was half open and ready to defy him, she had subconsciously slowed down. She gazed in the direction they left for a moment before returning to Han Tu and Han Huo. "Go back to your rooms and rest. There won't be any more fights to watch tonight. Also, you all better keep your mouth shut about what you saw," instructed Rose after her cold eyes scanned the crowd. The shop workers and pharmacists, whose minds had been blown, tactfully dispersed. All along, the workers thought that only the master of Celestial Pearl, Han Shuo, had very formidable strength. But after that night, they realized that the Celestial Pearl had been concealing their true strength, as though they had the backing of an extremely powerful powerhouse. They were pleasantly surprised by that and discussed the incident in low voices in their rooms. Woman, you did pretty well." As soon as the threat was neutralized, Han Huo returned to being a loud and conceited jerk. "You did not abandon us and escape by yourself. You demonstrated a spirit of loyalty. All right, in the future, I will no longer say any bad things about you behind your back." The first half of Han Huo's words were pleasant to Rose's ears, but the latter half angered her and made her glared at Han Huo. Then she recalled something and looked in the direction Han Hao left. She asked, "Who is that teenager?" "He's our eldest brother, Han Hao. Didn't you hear us?" replied Han Huo straightforwardly as Rose had gained his trust. He's also his son." Rose was astounded. She was very astonished about Han Tu and Han Huo's existence. She found it unbelievable that there were more. "Of course," replied Han Tu. While smiling innocently at Rose, he asked, "Do you fancy my father? If you do, just say it. We brothers are all open-minded people. Besides, we are very happy with your performance today. You will have our approval." "Shut up." Rose turned embarrassed and hastily left. "You stupid, you can't just spell it out like that. Hell, you may look innocent on the outside, but you sure are dirty inside," chided Han Huo smilingly. Chapter 823, Han Hao Aka Little Skeleton GDK 823. Han Hao Aka Little Skeleton Han Shuo was currently unaware of what happened in Celestial Pearl. He was at the City Lord's manor house, as Baum had invited him over. Han Shuo had been surveilling Baum day and night using his demon generals. But other than hearing Baum instructing his divine guard to investigate Goldstone Enterprise, Han Shuo did not discover anything else that was suspicious. But that alone was enough evidence for Han Shuo not to trust Baum, and to know that Baum had an ulterior motive in eagerly and generously helping him set up the Celestial Pearl branch. Baum had been waiting for Han Shuo in the drawing room. As soon as Han Shuo stepped inside, Baum came forward cordially to welcome him. He asked if Han Shuo was happy with the Celestial Pearl branch. Han Shuo, too, had big smiles across his faces and exchanged a round of pleasantries with Baum. After that, he went straight to the subject. "May I know what you have invited me here for?" It's like this. I have a friend who wants to purchase some rather unique medicines from Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Is it possible for Celestial Pearl to develop and manufacture it?" Baum hesitated for a moment before he answered. Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment. The demon general that had been constantly following and watching Baum from 100 meters away did not see Baum receive any friends. Therefore, Han Shuo was rather surprised by those words of Baum's. Han Shuo thought about it for a moment and recalled that Baum was a cultivator of the Edict of Space. Space mirrors, a divine device that uses energy crystals as the power source, should be very easy for Baum to manufacture. As the demon general must remain some distance away from Baum, and sometimes they would be separated by walls and barriers, it was possible that Baum had communicated with his friends using a magical space mirror without the demon general seeing it. "May I know which kind of unique medicine your friend required?" Han Shuo bunched his brows and asked smilingly. "My friend deals with buying and selling magical beasts. Some of them have very tough skin and are very difficult to deal with." Having some poisonous medicine would be useful. Although it is very illegal to make poisonous medicines in other dominions, it's not that big of a deal in the Destiny and Space dominions. We can work together if you are interested. If not, we'll just forget about it. I'm not one who would force others to do something they don't want, explained Baum in a natural and ordinary tone. Poisons were strictly prohibited in the dominions of life and light. Even an average pharmacy in the death, darkness, and destruction dominions dared not sell poisons openly. The chemists and pharmacists that tested poisons on people were also hunted down like god hunters in most dominions. As with most things, the riskier the business, the greater the profit. Although the pharmacies will not openly display the poisons on the rack, they would secretly sell them in the black market. There were plenty of pharmacies that participated in this business. As long as they have the proper channels and political connections sorted out, they wouldn't get into trouble. However, the poison makers, especially those who experimented on human beings, were hated by everyone. Although they were not as infamous as the god hunters, once their deeds were discovered, their businesses would be ransacked by divine guards. Therefore, those who conduct this business would never do it openly. Back then in the City of Shadows, Han Shuo had exposed Godswamp Pharmacy's deeds. Their assets were seized by the House of Saint, and a few of the core members were executed. Han Shuo bunched his brows closer. He thought, there are many pharmacies out there that specialize in producing poisons. Why is Baum specifically looking for me to do it? Baum was the city lord of Ethereal City. With the most powerful man in the city arranging the business for him, there shouldn't be an issue. But what exactly was he up to? A bunch of thoughts and ideas rapidly went through his mind. After remaining silent for a moment, Han Shuo suddenly put on a faint smile and said, "This trade is risky. First, I need to meet that friend of yours. I will only consider doing that business if I feel that he is a trustable person." Han Shuo originally planned on flatly refusing the proposal, but he recalled that this might be the reason behind Baum's generous aid. Han Shuo intended to slowly and carefully investigate the truth. "Just as you said, this trade is risky. I need to ask him for his opinion and see if he's willing to meet you," Baum replied after thinking for a moment. "Well then, let me know when there's an update." Han Shuo smiled and said, "If there's no other business, I shall return." "There aren't any other businesses, but I personally would like to ask you some questions." "May I?" said Baum hastily when he saw that Han Shuo was wanting to leave. "You are being overly polite, City Lord. Please, fire away any questions you have. I will tell you everything, as long as I know the answer." Han Shuo sat back on his seat politely and did not leave right away. "I was very fortunate to have a glorious combat with you, sir, and I'm very admiring of your strength. But when I recalled the battle, I noticed that the energy you used was very unique. It is an energy that I have never seen over my many years spent on Elysium. I'm very curious about it. Could you clear up my confusion?" asked Baum very sincerely. He was very interested in the energy that Han Shuo used. Han Shuo, naturally, will not tell Baum the truth. But instead of straightforwardly refusing to answer, Han Shuo made up lies on the fly, describing demonic arts as another form of the fighting aura. He also included some terminology of demonic arts that no one in the universe knew to confuse Baum. Baum had turned muddle-headed after listening to the first few sentences. As Baum had no understanding of demonic arts and Han Shuo's words contained both truth and lies, Baum could not tell if Han Shuo was talking gibberish. After giving a long explanation, Han Shuo pretended to be tired and said, "I have said everything there is to say. This kind of energy is rather hard to understand. Even I don't fully comprehend it. It's quite normal if you don't understand." It's quite late already, I should go home." Han Shuo bowed and took his leave. It was late at night. That high god of lightning who tried to raid Celestial Pearl Pharmacy had been weaving back and forth through remote alleys. However, he always felt as though someone was following him. He flew left and right, stopped midway to scan his surroundings, carefully checked, and made sure that no one was following him. However, that feeling of being followed never left him. He was overwhelmed with shock. He had paid a considerable price in his attempt to raid the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy and take revenge for his brother. Even with his meticulous planning, he did not expect that a terrifying teenager would suddenly show up and wreck his plans. He had seen just how easily Han Hao killed his early-stage high god friend, and it terrified him. As he had no confidence in defeating Han Hao, and much less against the joined forces of Han Hao and Rose, he retreated from the pharmacy. That feeling of being followed made him afraid of going home, lest he exposes his real identity and causes his family clan troubles. He wandered in the most remote and desolate region in Ethereal City and tried his best to throw off the follower. But after trying again and again, no matter how hard or which method he tried, someone or something seems to be following him. Out of helplessness, he stopped in a remote forest of stones in Ethereal City and no longer tried to shake off the follower. He looked all around and yelled, "I won't be running anymore." Come out. A moment later, from a group of stone pillars 1,000 meters away, Han Hao walked out emotionlessly. Han Hao was different from the 5 elite zombies. Although he did not obtain the 5 elemental yuan energy or the 5 elemental treasures, he received something much better: a portion of Han Shuo's memories related to demonic arts. In this universe, other than Han Shuo, the only person who could truly put demonic art to use was neither Balins, Sanguis, nor Gilbert. It was Little Skeleton, or Han Hao. Balins and Sanguis cultivated in non-mainstream forms of demonic arts. God-slaying devil path and blood god mantra were not the proper, traditional, and supreme practice of demonic arts. In this universe, other than Han Shuo, only Little Skeleton who obtained part of his memory cultivated in the proper form of demonic art. But as he was not an identical life form as Han Shuo, there were deviations in his cultivation. He does not make progress realm by realm as Han Shuo does, and his cultivation was intertwined with the energy of death. His realm was also very vague and indistinct. However, not only that the deviations had not harmed him, it made his strength even more strange and unfathomable. Mixing cultivations in the energy of death and demonic arts had been making him stronger and stronger. Back then, when he separated with Han Shuo, they had around the same strength. During those 50 years that Han Shuo had been rapidly advancing in strength, Han Hao had also been advancing his strength at the same rate. The reason that Hao could follow this high god of thunder and not lose track no matter the trick he tried was, Han Hao had also been refining demon generals using divine souls just as Han Shuo had. Although his demon generals were not as great as those of Han Shuo, they nonetheless possessed the basic stealth capability. Therefore, no matter how hard the raider tried, he could not escape from Han Hao's tracking. "It's you." The masked raider's heart sank when he saw that ice-cold teenager. Having fought Rose and knowing her strength, the raider wouldn't be too worried if it was Rose who went after him. However, if it was Han Hao, he had no confidence in winning. Han Hao did not waste a single word with him. Upon emerging from the forest, he charged forward with his bone spear. When he deployed his domain of divinity, all the elements of death nearby wildly gushed into it while a surge of killing intent erupted. The killing intent aura carried the element of death as it circulated. It formed a violent stream of air blowing towards the masked raider. "You think I'm afraid of you?" He was very annoyed to have been pursued so long. Although he was unwilling to get entangled with Han Hao, as Han Hao had attacked, he had no choice but to fight. Han Hao continued to remain silent. He flew behind the violent stream of air while wielding the bone spear. The 7 bone spurs on his back were swaying as though they could fly out to kill at any moment. The High God Raider formed multiple stationary thunderbolts and arranged them before him. He made a shield of thunderbolts to defend himself from Han Hao's attack. A loud and violent explosion erupted in the stone forest. Thunderbolts flew everywhere. Killing intent dispersed before rapidly reconverging. A large area of Steely was shattered, and it caused the entire region to be filled with dust, stones, and gaudy lights. The 2 energies that were miraculously intertwined struck the shield of static thunderbolts. They repeatedly gathered and dispersed. After many pulsations, another airstream would form and bombard the raider. A 3-meter-long bone spear had also been flying around in the airstream, boosting the energy and power of the airstream. Upon taking the first blow, the raider knew that Han Hao's strength was above his. He also noticed that the energy Han Hao used was very evil. He felt very helpless when he saw the violent stream made of the aura of death and killing intent was bombarding yet again. He had been exhausting his divine energy rapidly as he used all his strength to defend himself. One of his hands was accumulating electricity, and another hand was forming thunder. Similar to cultivators of the water energy, cultivators of the thunder energy could attack in two forms using their divine energy. The energy of thunder in their body needed to be sent out in a certain manner to form thunderbolt and lightning attacks. A god of the thunder energy using both electricity and thunderbolt meant that he was attacking with all his strength. Terrifying sounds of explosions continuously sounded. Several dozen thunderbolts revolved around him before they gradually merged into one. After that, all the electrical power he had accumulated charged the thunderbolt, making its diameter as great as an ancient tree. When the raider went all out, the 7 bone spurs behind Han Hao finally detached and flew out. In an abstruse trajectory, they flew into the airstream congealed using the auras of death and killing intent. When the 7 bone spurs entered the airstream, it seemed as though the airstream had turned alive. As it flew by violently, it would sweep up and devour everything nearby. Several dozen thick and strong stele were sucked into the airstream. When the airstream finally came, the several dozen stele that had been spun up were the first to strike. That alone ate away more than half of his thunder energy. After that, an even more powerful airstream came whacking. When the stele shattered, the bone spurs that had been hiding in the airstream abruptly and sneakily shot at the raider. Having been caught by surprise, the raider had no choice but to spend some energy on dealing with the bone spurs. He was unable to deploy the power of the enormous thunderbolt to its fullest potential. A world-shaking explosion erupted. The tremendous blow produced a disturbance that spread far and wide. The raider, somehow, became covered with blood. Han Hao walked out from the large cloud of dust. His eyes were fixed on the raider. 7 bone spurs were miraculously hovering behind him. The 3-meter-long bone spear in his hand was aimed right at the raider. It was at this moment that a strange space-time fluctuation abruptly appeared in midair. Han Hao, who was ready to deal the finishing blow, creased his brows and raised his head to sense the space-time fluctuation. Then, without saying a word, he turned on his heels and flew away. He was far away by the time that the space-time was torn. Right after Han Hao disappeared, a fissure was torn in space-time, and Baum the city lord arrived. He shot a glance at the bloody high god and bunched his brows. He did not speak or ask the raider anything, but gestured impatiently at him with his hand before rapidly flying in the direction Han Hao that disappeared. Chapter 824, I made these GDK 824. I made these Han Hao had run away because he did not want to meet Baum at this moment. Although Baum was a cultivator of the Space Edict, without knowing the precise location, it was difficult for him to locate a person. As soon as Han Hao left the region, he turned himself into a shadow and concealed the terrifying aura of his body. He deliberately moved towards populated and crowded regions, mixing his aura with gods who were cultivating in gymnasiums. This would confuse Baum's senses and make it very difficult to lock onto Han Hao's precise location. Baum carefully sensed for Han Hao's aura, and when he found something, he would instantly teleport to the location through his command over the energy of space. However, he would always fail to get Han Hao. After doing so several times, Baum noticed that he was getting closer and closer to the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. To avoid Han Xiu's suspicion, Baum decisively gave up on pursuing Han Hao and retreated. At the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in Ethereal City. Upon returning, Han Xiu noticed that there were bodies lying all around the shop, and Han Huo and Han Tu were examining the bodies while muttering something. He was shocked when he saw the body of that high god whose cranium had been punctured. Han Xiu moved like a shadow and appeared beside Han Huo and Han Tu. What happened? Was there a high god? Asked Han Xiu as he leaned over to examine the body. 2 high gods, one early stage and one mid-stage. Even Rose can't stop them, explained Han Tu. Han Xiu's face jolted and he looked at Han Huo and Han Tu with astonished eyes. He asked in a confused tone, how did this one die? The mid-stage one should be busy fighting Rose. And the early stage one, he shouldn't be one that you two can fight, right? No one understood Han Tu and Han Huo's strengths better than Han Xiu. Although the two had a great understanding of the energy of earth and fire, the realm they were at limited their firepower. Therefore, logically speaking, they should not be able to fight a high god. Our eldest brother killed him. Han Huo said excitedly. After such a long time, our eldest brother has become so powerful that he killed this early-stage high god in just a moment. This cunt couldn't even fight back. Haha, father, elder brother is now pursuing the other high god. I reckon he will be back soon. What? He killed this high god in a moment? Cried Han Shuo in surprise. In Han Shuo's mind, little skeleton was still that small and thin little kid. He did not expect little skeleton to grow so powerful in just several decades. The fact that little skeleton could kill an early-stage high god in a moment meant that he was at least one realm above the raider. Back then, when Han Shuo separated with little skeleton, they possessed only low god strengths. To become more powerful than an early-stage high god meant that his strength had been improving at around the same rate as Han Shuo's. For all these while, Han Shuo had assumed that the 5 elite zombies would grow faster than little skeleton, as the 5 were born from the places of extreme yuan, and they had obtained the 5 elemental yuan treasures. Having all those innate advantages, it was only reasonable that the 5 elite zombies would be stronger than little skeleton. But unexpectedly, not only that little skeleton wasn't weaker than the 5 elite zombies, he had been leading far ahead in strength. Moreover, this gap in strength seemed to be growing wider. Father, these raiders came soon after you left. I think that fella who asked to meet you is involved, said Han Tu. He wanted to inform Han Shuo of his suspicions as soon as possible. Tell me what happened in detail. Han Shuo took a deep breath to temporarily cast aside his excitement about Han Hao and started focusing on the matter at hand. After Han Tu and Han Huo narrated the entire incident once through, Han Shuo's suspicions over Baum grew even greater. It was also at this moment that the demon general that had been surveilling Baum detected an intense space-time fluctuation from the gymnasium Baum used for meditation. Han Shuo was astonished. He immediately commanded the demon general to get closer to the gymnasium and sensed for a moment. Through the demon general, Han Shuo discovered that Baum had disappeared from the manor house. As the demon general could not tear apart spacetime to pursue Baum, Han Shuo could not know where Baum went and who he met. Han Shuo replayed Han Tu and Han Huo's narration in his head and connected it with Baum's unusual movement right now. His suspicion over Baum grew ever stronger. But as he had temporarily lost track of Baum, Han Shuo knew only half of the picture. At this moment, Rose, who heard Han Shuo's voice, came out from the gymnasium she lived in. She walked to Han Shuo and gave him some more details of the story. She then remarked, "That kid of yours is very powerful. He is now pursuing the raider. I think he might be able to discover something. I do not know any of the faces of those who have died here. I wonder which forces they were from. Thank you for protecting my children," Han Shuo said to Rose sincerely. He was touched that Rose put her life on the line to give Han Tu and Han Huo an opportunity to escape. "You are my master. It is my duty to obey your orders." Although Rose still wore the same emotionless face on the outside, she was secretly delighted to hear that from Han Shuo. "Father, this woman has pretty decent strength and is much more powerful than your other women. Not only that, she is even very docile to you. Hee, why don't you?" Han Huo took a glance at Rose before he softly suggested to Han Shuo in a mischievous smirk. Although Han Huo had lowered his voice as much as possible, Rose was standing just a few steps away. As a high god, there was no way that she did not hear those words of Han Huo's. A light glistened from her eyes when she heard Han Huo's suggestion. Although she looked as though she didn't care what Han Huo said, her hands, however, were grasping each other very tightly out of nervousness. "Don't say that." Han Shuo frowned at Han Huo and chided in a low voice, "Our relationship isn't what you imagined. We are just friends. After 100 years, she will be free to go. You better cut saying this kind of nonsense from now on." The serious response from Han Shuo did not frighten Han Huo. Instead, Han Huo continued to smirk mischievously as his gazes went back and forth between Han Shuo and Rose. Rose felt a mixed array of emotions when he heard Han Shuo's response. She felt both glad and disappointed to hear that Han Shuo considered her a friend, glad that Han Shuo did not consider her as a slave but a friend, and disappointed that Han Shuo had thought of her as just a friend instead of something more than friends. She did not know if she should be happy or sad about it. Han Tu, Han Huo, Rose, and Han Shuo discussed the incident for a while. Then, At the first light of dawn, Han Shuo suddenly turned delighted and looked towards a misty and dark street. A teenager wearing an emotionless face silently appeared. When he saw the pleasantly surprised Han Shuo, happiness, a rare sight, was seen on his face. "Father," greeted Han Hao cordially after he came to Han Shuo. "Haha, great to see you again, son." Of all his kids, Little Skeleton was the closest to Han Shuo. Back then in the Babylon Academy of Magic and Force, when Han Shuo was a nobody, it was Little Skeleton who had been doing the menial cleaning work for him. Seeing Little Skeleton again, at dawn reminded Han Shuo of those times. He could still vividly recall the scene of a tiny little skeleton stealthily hauling 2 bags of trash to the dumping site. This bond between them might be even deeper than any of the relationships Han Shuo had with his women. Han Shuo could not be more proud to see that Little Skeleton has grown into a handsome youngster that looked somewhat like himself. "I couldn't kill that fella. Baum the city lord suddenly appeared and I had to leave. Otherwise, if he caught up to me, it would be very troublesome," said Han Hao in a very gentle tone, as though he was somewhat embarrassed and afraid that Han Shuo might reprimand him for not having completed the task well. Perhaps Han Shuo was the only person in the world that could make him reveal that emotion. "Let's talk inside," said Han Shuo smilingly as a flying sword flew out and tipped on all of the bodies. While the bodies were liquefying, Han Shuo and the others walked into one of the buildings in Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. With Han Tu around to help, many underground secret chambers were built in this Celestial Pearl branch. That building they entered had a secret entrance to the secret chambers. They descended several hundred meters underground to a clean and neat secret chamber. After hearing from Little Skeleton, or Han Hao, Han Shuo finally knew where Baum had gone. As the city lord of Ethereal City, Baum could detect battles between powerful high gods within the city through the energy towers strategically located all around the city. With his command over the Edict of Space, Baum could get himself to the battlefield in an instant. Baum did not go to interrupt the battle in Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, but had instantly rushed to the Forest of Stones where Han Hao fought the raider. Having known that, it became impossible for Han Shuo not to find Baum suspicious. "Father, Baum actually has connections with our kind of people and have been supplying us with all kinds of goods. In fact, he is one of the leading figures among us," Han Hao said to Han Shuo immediately after they entered the secret chamber. Han Shuo stared blankly for a moment and asked puzzlingly, "Your kind of people? What do you mean?" "God hunters, that's what we are commonly called," explained Han Hao. After taking a short while looking at Han Shuo, he explained, "After our separation, I went to the Death Dominion. Soon after stepping into the Death Dominion, I was hunted by a God hunter who was slightly stronger than I was. It took me a great deal of planning and effort to defeat him. From him, I learned everything about God hunters and the methods of consuming another person's divine energy. And so, I devoured his divine energy. I immediately sensed the growth in my divine energy." From Han Hao's narration, Han Shuo learned that soon after they separated, he came across a God hunter. That unlucky God hunter had led to Han Hao becoming a leading figure in the field of God hunting. After taking the divine energy from the God hunter, Han Hao had been venturing everywhere, looking for other cultivators of the energy of death to improve his strength. More than a few hundred experts died to Little Skeleton within a short few decades, and his fame soared among the God hunting community. Many fierce and ruthless God hunters volunteered to be his henchmen. Having been used to raising an army in the Netherworld, Little Skeleton knew exactly how to control the bunch of ruthless and fierce gods. With that, the God Hunter faction led by Little Skeleton gradually grew stronger and stronger. The cruel and savage Han Hao with formidable strength had obtained the trust of his followers. Not only that, Little Skeleton had managed to raise his strength to high godhood within a short time. His followers, who originally had puny strength, also rapidly improved along. They became a faction of God hunters that everyone in the Death Dominion feared. Then, later in time, some of the leaders of the God Hunter Alliance went to him and invited him to join the alliance. As to better expand his power and influence, Little Skeleton accepted the invitation. He had become an important leadership figure in the alliance, and his influence in the party was still continuing to grow. Being one of the leading figures of the God Hunter Alliance, Little Skeleton had the qualifications to know some of their inner secrets. Little Skeleton had made relevant inquiries before coming to the Space Dominion and learned about Baum's cooperation with several leadership figures of the God Hunters. He had never met Baum before, and he did not want Baum to learn about his presence in the city. Therefore, Little Skeleton ran and avoided him as soon as Baum came. "You little joker, I didn't expect that you have actually become a God Hunter." After listening to Little Skeleton narrating the whole sequence of events, Han Shuo finally understood why his strength was so much greater than the elite zombies. As Han Shuo himself was half a God Hunter, and as Little Skeleton was a living being that he had brought into existence, he definitely wouldn't have any ideas just because Little Skeleton became a God Hunter. After taking a short pause, Han Shuo asked, "Oh yeah, God Hunters have an almost uncontrollable craving to devour divine energy. Did you manage to overcome the corruption?" Under Han Shu's attentive gazes, Han Hao nodded his head in a natural manner. However, he seemed rather confused. "Actually, I have wanted to ask Father about it. Why is it that my followers would get uncomfortable head to toe if they have not devoured divine energy every once in a while, but I have never felt this way?" "You have never felt the corruption?" Han Shu was flabbergasted. Back then, after the first time Han Shu devoured another person's divine energy, he had to take a period of time and a great deal of willpower to overcome the addiction. But Han Hao had never felt it. How was that possible? "Yeah, ever since the start, I've not felt anything different. To me, it's just about improving my strength. I can immediately withdraw if I feel that an opponent is too strong and could cause me harm. I don't feel any urges even if I don't devour any divine energy for years," explained Han Hao. Han Shu was amazed. He thought about it for a moment as he looked at Han Hao up and down before replying. "Perhaps it had something to do with the unique circumstances surrounding your creation." "Oh, right, are you cultivating in demonic arts? I sense demon generals in the bones spurs at your back. You refined them." "I have started cultivating demonic arts ever since I obtained the memories from Father. Other than demon generals, I also know how to refine demonic weapons. Look at this bone spear, it's one of the things I've refined. Yeah, and my new body, the skin, flesh, and veins, I've made them myself." Little Skeleton nodded and excitedly showed off his accomplishments to Han Shuo. Han Shuo was stunned. He finally knew why Little Skeleton would be stronger than the 5 elite zombies, Gilbert and Ballins. It's thanks to the cultivation knowledge he had accidentally passed to Little Skeleton. Chapter 825. Could it be him? GDK 825. Could it be him? Ethereal City. Inside a luxurious villa in the southeast region. The wounded High God of Thunder, after taking plenty of detours, finally returned to his home. Upon arrival, he scuttled to his secret chamber and used Thunder divine essences to heal himself. The High God had suffered quite some injuries in the battle against Little Skeleton. He needed a period before he could regain his full health. The divine essences glistened and sparked in his palm as the lightning divine energy slowly filled the damaged areas around his divine body. He could finally start to relax. The High God of Thunder's mind was shrouded with fear after having fought Han Hao. The fusion of the energy of death and demonic arts had produced an extremely strange but wicked energy. Although his strength was not in the least inferior to Little Skeleton, in a battle, the High God of Thunder was completely on the back foot. It was the few bone spurs that caught him by surprise that had caused him the greatest injuries. He could not avoid the bone spurs, and his divine body was pierced. This had prevented him from unleashing his full strength in the remainder of the battle. While he was resting and recuperating, he suddenly sensed an unusual space-time fluctuation in his villa. With one thought, a big crystal ball appeared in his hand, and he used it to observe around his house. He saw that Baum, the city lord, had noiselessly arrived at a secluded spot in his house. He kept away the divine essences in his hands, and using the crystal ball, he instructed, "Bring the city lord here." 2 divine guards immediately moved out from the shadows and respectfully led Baum to the secret chamber. After the 2 divine guards dismissed themselves, Baum immediately bunched his brows and asked, "Leon, what actually happened? That celestial pearl pharmacy is really, really terrifying. I was occupied with that woman, and then a teenager abruptly appeared. That teenager had pursued me from the pharmacy all the way to the stone forest. I just couldn't shake him off. After battling him, I discovered that I am no match against him." explained the person called Leon in a fearful manner and a frightened face. If that woman and that teenager were to join forces, I'd have been killed. I finally now believe what you have told me previously, that Brian ought to have similar strength as yours. Leon had suffered a crushing defeat in his attempt to raid the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. His soldiers were all killed, and he nearly suffered the same fate. It was a huge blow to him, both physically and mentally. It appeared that he might even just forget about avenging the death of his younger brother. Baum coldly groaned after hearing those words. He said, "Leon, have you forgotten who killed your brother? Are you going to tell me that you won't be taking revenge for your brother?" Leon forced a smile and then let out a sigh. He replied, "I want to avenge his death. But if I were to persist, I'm afraid that my entire family clan will be joining him. City Lord, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy is too strong for me to handle. If you do not have complete certainty, please, do not drag my family clan into the mess. Don't you worry about it. I understand the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy much better than you do. Tonight, at the very least, you have managed to figure out their true strength. The next time that we strike, it will not end up like this. Rest assured, I will only look for you when I'm certain that we can utterly crush them," consoled Baum. After taking a short pause, he asked, "Tell me about that teenager, how he looked, his strength, energy, temperament. I want to know everything." He looked at 15 or 16 years old. He has a rather bewitchingly handsome face. He cultivates in the energy of death, but his divine energy is rather peculiar. It was not pure, but its power was very frightening. He's uncommunicative and doesn't talk at all. From his looks, he should have killed plenty of people before. Ah yes, his attacks were incredibly ruthless. Every strike his make was to kill. Truly a frightening teenager. Fear could be seen on Leon's face when he talked about Little Skeleton. Baum started to share Leon's uneasiness as he listened to the explanation. But for some reason, the more he heard, the more he felt that he had come across the description of this person before. Then suddenly someone came across his mind. His face jolted and he softly cried out, "Could it be him?" "Who?" Leon was stunned and he immediately asked, "City Lord, do you know who he is? What's his origin? For all the ages I have lived on Elysium, I have never heard of anyone who possessed such terrifying strength at such a young age. Does your lordship know?" "Nothing. You focus on healing your injuries and get to full health. For now, you should avoid going outside as much as possible. I will look for you when I have a surefire plan in place." Upon finishing those words, before Leon could ask any more questions, Baum hurriedly left the villa. He vanished in the blink of an eye. Han Shuo was very happy about Han Hao or Little Skeleton's arrival. For several days in a row, he had been staying with Han Hao, Han Tu, and Han Huo, discussing all kinds of random things. Han Shuo had also told Han Hao about his understanding and recent discoveries in demonic arts. Although Han Tu and Han Huo were there, for some reason, the two understood nothing about the demonic arts that Han Shuo taught. They also did not show any interest in cultivating demonic arts. Han Shuo thought that there was no point in forcing the two to cultivate demonic arts if they did not want to. Therefore, he spent most of the effort on Han Hao. When Han Shuo started talking about the true essences of demonic arts with Han Hao, he was shocked to discover that Little Skeleton already had an in-depth understanding of it. He was already very skilled at refining weapons, demon generals, and related fields. He was also adept at deploying demonic formations and using demonic weapons that were driven by the soul. Han Shuo could not help himself but gasp in amazement. Han Shuo was also very amazed at the dual energy in Little Skeleton's body. He did not expect that, just with the portion of memories from his soul, without any guidance from anyone, Little Skeleton could attain such great heights in his cultivation. It was simply miraculous. Han Shuo also discovered that Little Skeleton was astonishingly good at understanding profound demonic art concepts. He needed only a moment of thinking to understand even the most complicated methods of manipulating energy. He did not reveal any expression of being confounded from start to finish, and had been absorbing demonic arts knowledge from Han Shuo like a sponge. Half a month went by like the blink of an eye. During that time, Han Shuo and Little Skeleton had been conversing at the secret underground chamber at Celestial Pearl. Although they did not use intimate words that a normal father and son would in their conversation, the two, whose minds were connected, knew that they were closer than any other parent and children in the world. They were so close that they did not need to adorn their relationship with any extra superfluous words. Han Mu, Han Shui, and Han Jin had yet to arrive at Ethereal City, and Han Shu was getting worried yet again. Through Rose, he asked the Ethereal City divine guards to pay attention to those entering the city, and to lead anyone called Han Mu, Han Shui, and Han Jin immediately to Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. One day, Han Shuo started talking about Baum, the Ethereal City Lord. He told him about McKinley's presence and the reason he remained friendly to Baum for now. Little Skeleton thought in silence for a moment before he suddenly said to Han Shuo, "Father, I have an idea. I might be able to find out from Baum where the divine body is hidden." "What's your plan?" Han Shuo was rather astonished. He said, "The High God of Thunder has managed to escape. Baum might have learned of your identity from that guy. I don't think that Baum would trust you if you look for him now. I can get other God Hunter leaders to ask him. As long as the price is right, they will surely help me with it." Little Skeleton waggled his eyebrows and explained, "In the world of God Hunters, there are no friends and no relationships. There are only profits. With enough money, they would do anything and everything for you. Crystal coins are no issue. If you think it'll work, there's no harm in trying," said Han Shu in a faint smile after he thought about it for a moment. "Then I need to take a trip outside Ethereal City. Father, in the future, we should avoid meeting in public places. My reputation isn't so good in other dominions. If others were to learn about our relationship, it will not be good for your Celestial Pearl Pharmacy," said Little Skeleton after hesitating for a moment. "We will talk about it in the future. You be careful out there." Han Shu was worried about the same thing. He had learned from Little Skeleton that his God Hunter followers in several other dominions were notorious for their misdeeds. If the public were to learn of their relationship, it will severely impact the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. But for the moment, Han Shu did not have a good solution for this potential issue. "Don't worry, Father. There are only a few in the world who could stop me from escaping, and Baum is not one of them," said Little Skeleton confidently. As a cultivator of demonic arts, Little Skeleton also knew many bizarre but miraculous methods of escaping. Therefore, it was not an outlandish claim. Han Shu nodded smilingly. Ever since he learned that Little Skeleton had the strength to injure a mid-stage high god expert and was cultivating multiple types of demonic arts, Han Shu became truly at ease about Little Skeleton's safety. Although the Elysium was enormous, and it housed a large number of powerful experts, Han Shu reckoned that only a very small number of gods were capable of killing Little Skeleton. Therefore, after hearing that Little Skeleton wanted to leave for some time, Han Shu agreed to it straightforwardly. 5 days after Little Skeleton left, Han Shu, who had been anxiously waiting for Han Mu, Han Shui, and Han Jin, finally received the news. The news came from Miles, the local manager for Goldstone Enterprise. Miles wasn't looking happy when he showed up. He informed Han Shuo that Han Jin had arrived at the Goldstone branch at Ethereal City, but he was severely injured. Han Shuo's face immediately turned cold. Without saying a word, he left Celestial Pearl Pharmacy with Miles and rushed to the Goldstone store. When Han Shuo entered the secret chamber in the Goldstone store, he saw Han Jin, who was in poor health. Han Jin, a cultivator of the metal energy, looked very frail and weak at this moment. As soon as he saw Han Shuo, with great difficulty, he forced a smile and struggled to sit up. Han Shuo hastily stepped forward and held him before channeling his demonic yuan to Han Jin's body. "Don't speak. Your injuries are severe. We need to stabilize your condition first." Han Shuo carefully took out a golden and shining pelleted medicine and stuffed it into Han Jin's mouth. He chewed the medicine and swallowed it. Han Jin's face immediately started to look healthier after taking the gold nugget-like medicine and could be seen slowly improving. Chapter 826, Rising Star GDK 826. Rising Star, although Han Jin possessed Goldstone Enterprise, as the wealthiest of the 5 elite zombies, Han Jin was not particularly great in strength. Goldstone Enterprise, as an energy crystal trading company, also did not possess a particularly powerful military unit. On the last trip to Ethereal City, Han Jin had carried many rare and precious rocks from another dominion. The information about their journey was somehow leaked. While his caravan was crossing the outskirts of the fringe, they were attacked by a group of raiders. Not only that Han Jin had lost all the precious rocks he carried, but all of the shop workers that traveled with him were also killed. If it wasn't for the fact that there was a mountainous region nearby, and his shop workers sacrificed their lives to hold back the raiders for him to escape, Han Jin might have perished. Using his magical innate power, Han Jin paved a tunnel through the mountains and lost himself from the raiders. He then managed to return to Ethereal City by himself. The rare minerals which he gathered from other dominions were gone. He was the only survivor of the attack. After the gold nugget-like pelleted medicine entered Han Jin's stomach, a miraculous yuan energy gently spread around his body. Strands of yuan energies filled his limbs and bones, slowly healing his damaged organs and veins. While traveling to Ethereal City, Han Xiuo had been collecting all kinds of rare, magical medicinal ingredients, and used them to refine certain medicines useful for the 5 elite zombies to replenish the yuan energies they exhausted. While the yuan energy was dissolving in Han Jin's body and slowly nourishing his body, Han Xiuo, using his demonic yuan, carefully nursed his injuries. Han Jin's pale white face finally had a shade of redness. Half an hour into the treatment, Han Jin started coughing violently and puked out a puddle of filthy, foul-smelling blood. He suddenly seemed to have gotten much better. Then he forced a smile and said to the worried Han Xiuo, "Don't worry, father. I'm all right now." Han Xiuo did not reply but continued to probe Han Jin's body condition using his consciousness. Then, after a long while, Han Xiuo heaved a light breath and seemed a little tired as he said, "Your injuries are severe. Luckily, I have been carrying medicines of the 5 elemental yuans and some rejuvenation pills. Otherwise, the injuries will surely leave a permanent effect. Hee, I knew that father will be here, therefore I rushed to the city at all costs," said Han Jin weakly in a smile. He took a lot of effort to sit up against the wall and refused Han Xiuo's assistance. "Do you know who did it?" asked Han Xiuo as his eyes suddenly turned chillingly cold. "I remember their faces, and I can recognize them when I see them. But I'm not familiar with the fringe, and I do not know their identities," said Han Jin. He then closed his eyes to recall the battle and described the faces of every attacker to Han Xiuo. Like Han Jin, Han Xiuo did not have much understanding about characters living in the fringe, and he also could not identify the attackers. "Here is 100 metal yuan revitalizing pills. Take 5 of it every day without interruption until you have finished the whole bottle. Focus on healing your injuries. We will talk after you have recovered." Han Xiuo instructed Metal Elite Zombie after he took out a large bottle of golden and shiny pelleted medicines. "Thank you, father. I knew I would be all right," replied Han Jin smilingly as he kept away the bottle of medicine. Han Xiuo then went forward to carry Han Jin and said, "Come to Celestial Pearl Pharmacy with me. It's safer there. Also, you should meet Little Earth and Little Fire." "Wait, I need to leave some instructions," said Han Jin before he called for Miles, who had been waiting right outside the door. He gave Miles a bunch of instructions, including not to let other branches know that he was injured and to pay some attention to the situation over in the fringe to see if, by any chance, that any of his workers survived. In a remote valley near the northwest of the fringe, a boorish and burly-looking man was fiercely conquering a coquettish woman on top of a tree trunk. There was a group of god hunters sitting near them, but they turned a blind eye to the activity as though nothing was happening. They were either concentrated on cultivating, studying scrolls in their hands, or wiping clean their divine weapons. Then, moments after a rapid increase in the rhythm's amplitude and frequency, the burly chap let out a long, loud howl of great satisfaction. He then casually pushed the half-conscious woman aside, wrapped his lower body in a piece of hide, and lied comfortably on an enormous stone chair. He gazed at the quiet and cool moon hanging at the zenith with his sleepy, half-open eyes as though he was waiting for something. Half an hour later, an ice-cold-looking teenager noiselessly appeared at the valley. He was slowly stepping towards that burly chap at the center of the valley. Fierce lights erupted from the eyes of all the god hunters in the valley as soon as they sensed an outsider was approaching. The divine weapons in their hands started to glow as brightly as the ferociousness in their eyes. They were ready to pounce on the comer and shred him into pieces. However, when they discovered that the person was a teenager, one of his eyes was light purple, and had 7 strange bone spurs sticking from his back. The hostility on their faces immediately vanished and was replaced with respect. They automatically part away, clearing a path for the teenager into the valley. "Hi, my friend. I heard that you have recently annihilated the Leo family. What a great contribution you have made for us god hunters. So, what's up? Are you here for business?" said the burly guy as he looked at Han Hao in a polite face. He was eating fruits while sitting relaxingly on the large chair at the center of the valley. "Polo, I have come to ask you for a favor," said Han Hao in a cold voice before he threw a big bag of black crystal coins under Polo's feet. "That's 300,000 black crystal coins. I need you to ask Baum, the ethereal city lord, the location of a space high god divine body that belonged to someone called McKinley. If you figured out its location, I will give you another 200,000 black crystal coins. And if you can somehow get me the soulless divine body, I will give you another 500,000 black crystal coins on top of everything." Polo, who had been lying lazily, suddenly opened his eyes wide and sat up straight. He looked up and down at Han Hao several times before he asked, "Do you know who McKinley is, and his relationship with Baum?" "I do," replied Han Hao as he nodded. His purple eye gave off a flash as he said, "I heard that you have lived in the Space Dominion for a while. Surely, you know about the story between Baum and McKinley. I also know that you have business dealings with Baum all these while. Those are the reasons I came to you. If you are looking for McKinley's divine body, it must mean you that have his divine soul. I don't know how you got his soul, but if McKinley gets his body back, it will definitely cause Baum a lot of trouble. Baum is an important trading partner for me. To damage the trade relationship for a mere 1 million black crystal coins, that doesn't sound like a profitable deal?" said Polo in a peal of gentle laughter. Then he squinted his eyes slightly as he said to Han Hao, 2 million black crystal coins. I will get you McKinley's body, even if it means offending Baum. What say you?" Han Hao nodded and replied, "Very well. I will hand you the rest of the money when you have the divine body." "No problem. I know that you are a trustable person," said Polo before he started laughing heartily. He added cordially, "That Baum cannot be considered a true god hunter. That sanctimonious hypocrite with his ethereal city will never be as close as we are." "Keep me updated. I'll be in ethereal city," replied Han Hao succinctly. He did not waste words with Polo, but indifferently turned on his heels and left the valley. Soon after Han Hao left, a god hunter with early-stage high god strength went to Polo with his brows bunched. He asked in a puzzled manner, "Chief, is it worth offending Baum for a mere 2 million black crystal coins? I have heard a little about the feud between McKinley and Baum. Once he gets his body back, he will most certainly go for Baum. Then, when Baum dies, our businesses with Ethereal City would be over. The gains just won't make up for the losses. Did you see just how young Han Hao is? It took him just 50 years to become one of the leading figures in the Alliance. The troop he leads had annihilated many family clans that sought to destroy us god hunters. His popularity and influence are still strongly trending upwards in the Alliance. This youngster has a great future ahead of him. During these years, Han Hao has never failed in any of his endeavors. Now that he wants to get Baum, Baum most likely will not make it. We might as well make some profits off his downfall," explained Polo like a master schemer. "But can he defeat Baum?" asked the god hunter. Recently I've received some interesting news, saying that Baum was nearly defeated by a youngster named Brian. That youngster named Brian has 2 sons named Han Huo and Han Tu. Think about it, Han Huo, Han Tu, Han Hao, doesn't that sound a little more than coincidence?" replied Polo in a grave face as he sat upright. "My lord, you mean Han Hao is related to that Brian?" "Not sure, but it seems very likely. If this is true, there is no way that Baum won't be dead. Before he dies, I might as well trade Han Hao a favor. And in doing so, I might even get 2 million black crystal coins. I say there cannot be a more wonderful trade than this," said Polo as he laughed heartily. Then, he instructed the god hunter, "Take the 300,000 black crystal coins to Baum, tell him I need to borrow McKinley's divine body for a few days. Given our relationship and the number of crystal coins, Baum will definitely hand over the soulless body willingly. McKinley has disappeared for so long. Who would have thought that he would return?" "Understood, my lord." The god hunter immediately got up to execute the task given to him. But he suddenly paused as a thought came to his mind. My lord, Han Hao is in Ethereal City. After I got McKinley's divine body, should I contact him and directly pass it to him? No, you must not. Ethereal City is filled with energy towers that Baum deployed. He must have placed a tracer in McKinley's divine body. Do not take that risk. Just leave a message for Han Hao to do the trade here. And remember to carry that divine body carefully. It's worth 2 million black crystal coins, instructed Polo. Yes, rest assured, my lord, it will be executed cleanly, pledged the person solemnly. Chapter 827. It's a casual thing. GDK 827. It's a casual thing outside the ethereal city, in the depth of a dense jungle. A young couple was engaging in a very exciting and vigorous exercise. Although they had been trying to keep their noises low, it nonetheless spread far and wide. 30 meters away, a very handsome teenager who looked like a 16 or 17 years old mortal was making water bubbles out of boredom. One after another, water bubbles floated out from his palms. They gently revolved in midair like crystal balls. Half an hour later, the moaning from the depth of the jungle became louder and louder. The young man bunched his brows, frowned, shook his head, and sighed. After another 10 minutes, the moaning sound had completely stopped, and yet, the activity in that region only seemed to be getting more and more vigorous. There was no sign that it was going to stop soon. Little Wood, are you done yet? The handsome teenager could not be more bored. He shouted, Father must be anxious that we aren't there yet. Can you hurry up and finish it? Right away. Right away, replied the exercising youngster, and he increased the frequency of his action. He turned the beauty who had passed out long ago around, pressed her against the tree, and then carried on with his expedition. After a long while, a thin, tall, muscular, and just as handsome teenager slowly walked out from the jungle in a satisfied face while holding up his pants. He looked at Han Shui, who was condensing water vapor bubbles, and smilingly asked, Creating life is such a pleasurable recreation. Why is it that you have no interest at all towards this exercise of love? You have been creating life all along the journey, but have you actually created any life? Han Shui rolled his eyes. The spinning water bubbles suddenly flew towards Han Mu, and they turned a large pool of water. It poured down on Han Mu and washed off all the scent on his body. No, I've been wondering about this actually. I really need to ask Father about this. Why is it that a good kid like me, who is filled with life, has failed to create any life for all these while? Han Mu then put on a mischievous smile and said, But perhaps you can. Why don't you give it a try? That woman is pretty fine and she is still unconscious. Carpe diem. Han Shui immediately put on a disgusted face and replied, You a filthy. Ha ha ha. All right, let's carry on with our journey. I have not seen Father for a long time and I'm really missing him, said Han Mu laughingly. He knew that Han Shui has disgust for such activities. He flung his dripping wet hair, and with a grin on his face, he started walking in the direction of Ethereal City. Wait, what about that lady? Han Shui bunched his brows and said, You have done this to 9 different ladies, and I'm only counting those you met on our way here. You always leave them to themselves after making them pass out. Do you not have the slightest sense of responsibility? This is called a hookup, casual sex. You are not expected to make any commitment. What responsibility do you mean? Han Mu shrugged and said, We were together only to pleasure each other physically, no strings attached. There are no fussy norms or rules that we are expected to follow. Don't be so outdated and pedantic. Fine, let's move on, replied Han Shui. He was having a headache and was afraid that the lady would bother them and not let go when she woke up. Little Wood, this is going to be the last time I'll do you a sentry duty. The noises you make were horrendous. What a prude, Han Mu rebutted. Why is it that you have not inherited this excellent and admirable trait of our father? Look at him, he would have fun wherever he goes. What a wonderful and unrestrained life he's living. I learned it all from our father. Why are you so slow at learning this? Han Shui forced a smile and shook his head. He did not try to dispute it, as although Han Mu might be exaggerating, there was some truth to it. Half a day later, Han Mu and Han Shui had walked out from the jungle and entered a small fort near the ethereal city. Soon after stepping into the fort, a young lady standing outside a gymnasium suddenly shrieked crazily, Han Mu, you bastard! I have finally found you. Two more young ladies located not far away were alerted by that shout. Right away, they glared at Han Mu and shouted, "Han Mu, don't you run now. Didn't you promise to always be at my side? You scoundrel, how could you disappear while I was asleep? You didn't even leave me a note?" The three ladies came from three different forces. One was in a small family clan, one operated a small business, and another was a divine guard squad leader from some city. After the shouting, the three noticed each other, and they suddenly realized that they weren't the only person Han Mu had fornicated. The anger that had been brewing in them for all these while erupted. The three young and beautiful ladies became abnormally enraged, and they charged at Han Mu like tigresses. They wanted to vent their anger on Han Mu. Han Mu made a grimace and hastily said to Han Shui, "Little water, hurry and run. This place is dangerous." Han Mu turned on his heels and started running as though he was very afraid of getting caught by the ladies. As he ran, he shouted, "Sissai, Mimi, Annie, do you have to be so serious? We are all just fooling around. Being so clingy isn't part of the game. Mimi, didn't you say that I'm your only love just a few days ago? How could you be so fierce to me now?" Han Mu, "I'll kill you," that beauty called Mimi charged it threateningly. She sent out unprecise radiation blasts, causing collateral injuries to the innocent gods who had just entered the fort. "Little water, run. Don't get caught," shouted Han Mu as he fled by weaving through the crowd. He seemed very practiced at that and managed to vanish in no time. The handsome face of Han Shui was filled with helplessness. He discovered that he couldn't run nearly as fast as Han Mu. Moments after trying to frantically flee, he found himself surrounded by the three ladies. Han Shui was feeling quite annoyed that he had to suffer such an ordeal every once in a while. He thought, when I see father, I must tell him about this. This fella is getting out of hand. Ladies, I have nothing to do with him. Why are you surrounding me?" said Han Shui in a forced smile as he tried to distance himself from Han Mu. "Why would he ask you to run if you have nothing to do with him? Also, you wouldn't be running from us," shouted the beauty called Mimi. "You won't be going anywhere until Han Mu shows himself. It has nothing to do with me." Han Shui hastily explained, "I only got acquainted with him while I'm traveling here. I'm not close to him at all. There's no point in catching me just because you couldn't get him." "I don't care. Han Mu has promised to marry me. If you get him back to me, I will set you free. Otherwise, you won't be going anywhere," said the lady called Annie. She gestured and commanded, "Surround him." A squad of divine guards immediately started to approach Han Shui menacingly. "Bitch, who are you? Why would Han Mu marry you? Know your place. He said I'm the only one he loved. You all get lost. Don't be so shameless to steal my man." "Shameless? You are the shameless one. He is mine." Before Han Shui could make any more explanation, the three ladies started a fierce-mouthed fight in the middle of the street. It appeared likely that it will escalate to a battle to the death over Han Mu. Stop fighting. Listen to me," shouted Han Shui as he cursed Han Mu in his mind. Then, when the three ladies simultaneously gathered their gazes on Han Shui, he put on a straight face and said, he had said those words not just to the three of you, but many, many more ladies. "Stop being foolish. He doesn't care about any of you. Friend, I don't care if you have anything to do with him or not, but you are going nowhere." A well-built middle-aged man with a face filled with knife scars joined the party. He stood beside the beauty called Mimi and said, "Since he had deflowered my daughter, then he must betroth my daughter. I don't care who he is, but he must take responsibility for his actions. Otherwise, not just him, but even you will be out of luck." The scar-faced middle-aged man possessed early-stage high-god strength. He cultivated in the energy of fire. He seemed to be repressing his anger, and he had considered himself kind for not immediately killing Han Shui. "I got him at you, wretched Han Mu. What do you want me to do now?" Han Shui could not be more vexed. He was trapped by three different powerful forces. He racked his brain on how to escape. "Apprehend him," the middle-aged man gestured and instructed his men to capture Han Shui. "Don't you touch him, this guy is mine," shouted the lady called Annie. Then, suddenly, a three-way fight started. They were fighting openly on the street for Han Shui. The three ladies fought each other while loudly cursing each other as shameless bitches. The entrance to the fort suddenly turned into an upheaval scene. All the gods nearby were stunned by what they saw. Who is this Han Mu guy? To have three beauties openly fighting in the public over him, what a legend. Damn, I'd die to have half the luck he has with women. I've heard of him. He's from the Life Dominion. It is said that he would screw around anywhere he goes. He is an infamous womanizer. Countless beauties had been ruined by him. Fucking hell, why is this person in Ethereal City? Everyone better keep an eye on your girlfriend and don't let her be stolen by that bastard. How could the Life Dominion produce such a scum? Sigh, the world is really getting more and more degenerate. I'm surprised that he had yet to be murdered by any woman. That fella has his sights set on every beauty in the world, claiming he does so with the sacred goal of creating life. Hell, against reason, there are whores out there who willingly let themselves be deceived by him. I really wonder how that youngster did it. You fat fuck, who did you call whore? I'll whore you. Mimi, who was in the middle of a battle, suddenly turned her crosshair to that bystanding fatty and bombarded him with fierce, radiant attacks. Little water, run. When things were at its most chaotic, the sneaky Han Mu softly cried from a corner of a gymnasium. All the trees in the region seemed to have turned alive. The tree branches started waving among the crowd like a big broom, causing the scene to be even more chaotic. Han Shui immediately reacted. While no one was noticing him, he hastily flew into the bystanding crowd and fled under the cover of the big trees. After Han Shui and Han Mu reunited, the two no longer dared stay in the fort a second longer. They immediately left the fort and rushed for Ethereal City. Chapter 828, Stand Down. GDK 828, Stand Down. This is all your fault, complained Han Shui as soon as the two escaped from the fort. If the three ladies had not started fighting each other, Han Shui might have been captured. This was not the first time he found himself in such a situation. Hell, how would I know that those women will be so damn clingy? I think from now on, I will only target those who are married. They are the most straightforward and would always part smoothly and cleanly after the act, said Han Mu. Where you think you are going, Han Mu? A roar sounded the distance. Then, the brawny middle-aged man could be seen rapidly closing the vast distances between them. His mid-god henchmen were also flying behind him at high speed. Han Mu and Han Shui turned to look at each other. They did not expect to be caught up soon after escaping from the fort with great effort. They felt somewhat helpless. That middle-aged man whose face was covered with scars was an early-stage high god of fire. He launched an attack while flying towards the two. A raging stream of fire shot towards the sky, flew over the heads of Han Mu and Han Shui, and formed an enormous firewall in their path. The flame traveled much faster than the two, and it overtook the two in no time. Although Han Mu and Han Shui had a profound understanding of the energy they cultivated, the energy contained in their body, however, was lagging far behind. When the fire produced by a high god raged in their path, they had no choice but to stop flying. Why don't we try to break through this firewall by merging our energy using the formation? As long as we make it through this plane and enter the dense forest ahead, they wouldn't be able to catch us. Han Mu proposed to Han Shui. He was confident that with his mastery over the energy of life, once they entered a dense forest, no one will be able to locate them. Too late, it seems, said Han Shui in a grimace. The pursuing party arrived as they spoke. It was indeed too late to try anything. Ah fuck, got him nit, cursed Han Mu softly. After looking all around him, for the first time ever, he felt a sense of remorse. He thought that he shouldn't have pulled Han Shui into the mess. Han Mu, accept your fate, said the brawny middle-aged man as he approached them step by step. As long as you marry my daughter, I will let bygones be bygones, or else I will give both of you hell. I have absolutely no feelings at all for your daughter. What's the point in forcing me to marry her? Said Han Mu in a wry smile. His eyes had been constantly scanning the surroundings. Capture them? The brawny man seemed to know that Han Mu was excellent in the art of fleeing. He stopped wasting words with them and instructed his men to capture the two before they could try anything. The mid-gods had wanted to give the two a good whacking long ago. They charged at the two upon hearing the command. It was at this time that an ear-piercing whistle abruptly sounded in the night sky. Multiple shadows that were as incisive as knives' pieces into those mid-gods who tried to capture Han Shui and Han Mu. Then came an explosion. A burst of sinister energy pounded the mid-gods and threw them off balance. None of them could touch Han Mu and Han Shui. Big brother, cried Han Mu and Han Shui simultaneously in surprise. they could not be happier. Little Skeleton, or Han Hao, swept his cold eyes across all the mid-gods that had been paralyzed before slowly turning to that high god of fire. He raised his 3-meter-long bone spear at the middle-aged brawny man, and in an emotionless face, he warned, "You step forward, you die." The middle-aged brawny man was enraged when he was that his henchmen were paralyzed after being struck by a strange energy. When he was about to make an attack himself, he suddenly noticed that the space all around him was filled with terrifyingly wicked energy that came out of nowhere. After creasing his brows and carefully sensing the energy, the man turned pale with fright. He cried, "Who are you? What's your relationship with Han Mu?" Han Hao did not answer but stared at him indifferently for a moment. Then, Han Hao turned to the inexplicably excited Han Mu and Han Shui and said, "Let's go," before walking in the direction of the ethereal city as though the high god of fire wasn't there. Han Mu and Han Shui giggled mischievously while making an insulting hand gesture at that high god of fire. Then, they too turned their backs at the high god and left with Little Skeleton happily. The few mid-gods who had finally got back to their feet felt so insulted by the trio that they nearly lost their minds. As soon as they got up, they started cursing and charged at the three, wanting to chop them into pieces. "Stand down," commanded the middle-aged brawny man. When his henchmen looked at him with puzzled gazes, he again shouted, "Do not pursue." "But, my lord." The middle-aged brawny man raised one hand to stop his henchmen from complaining and gazed at Han Hao, who was slowly leaving. He said, "Don't speak, we will go home." Although the group of mid-gods was puzzled, they did not dare to ask or complain. They hung their heads down dejectedly and followed their master home. "Father, did you catch him?" "Where is he?" shouted the beauty called Mimi excitedly. "From now on, you will not mention that Han Mu guy anymore." The brawny man suddenly put on a stern face and instructed in a deep voice, "He is not a person that we could touch. For the sake of our family clan, you better forget about him, the sooner the better." "Why, father? How could you do this to me?" Mimi's father had never been so stern to her before. Tears had started rolling in the rims of her eyes. "I cannot let the entire family clan be annihilated just because of you. Mimi, bear this in mind, you will never ever again look for Han Mu. Or else, I will just lock you up," warned the brawny man coldly without sparing Mimi's feelings. "My lord, those two youngsters, do they have that kind of strength?" asked one of the confused mid-god henchmen. "Han Mu and Han Shui do not have that strength. But as to that youngster who showed up after, he's definitely not one that I can defeat." The brawny man turned to his henchman and said, "That youngster carried a strong killing intent. He is definitely not a merciful person. Had we recklessly attacked just then, all of us would have died, myself included." The mid-gods were dumbstruck after hearing those words. Even Mimi turned silent, and she no longer blamed her father for being so harsh. "What was that about?" Han Hao asked his younger brothers soon after they stepped into an expansive mountain range just outside Ethereal City. "Ask that fucker," said Han Shui as he glared at Han Mu. Han Mu felt a guilty conscience when Han Hao also stared at him. He told Han Hao a summary of his deeds. Han Hao was a great listener. It was after Han Mu gave the whole story that he creased his brows slightly and reprimanded, "Be more careful next time, and put more energy on cultivation instead." "Yes, brother," replied Han Mu with his head low. He was a little afraid of Han Hao and didn't dare to make rebuttals. "All that left is the two of you. Father has been very anxious. He is going to leave the city to look for you if you don't get there soon." Han Mu and Han Shui were excited when Han Shuo was mentioned. They simultaneously asked, "How is father doing?" Han Hao thought for a moment and replied, "Very good." Ethereal City, the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Baum personally came to visit Han Shuo's pharmacy. After walking around the shop, he followed Han Shuo into the guest's lounge. He casually asked, "Right, I heard that there have been thieves who tried to raid the shop. How are you dealing with it?" "We get clowns who try to sneak inside every once in a while." "Don't worry, City Lord, they can't do us any harm," replied Han Shuo smilingly. Then he gestured at Rose, Han Huo, and Han Tu to retreat before he asked, "City Lord, have you come here with an update?" Baum nodded. He withdrew a magical mirror, and it began hovering in midair. He explained, "That friend of mine does not live in Ethereal City. I usually communicate with him with a magical mirror. Instead of meeting face to face, is it all right if you talk to him through the device?" Han Shuo bunched his brows and thought for a moment before he replied, "Fine." Baum then proceeded with inserting a strand of his divine energy into the magical mirror. The energy crystals embedded around the mirror started shining. A blurry figure appeared in the mirror and gradually turned clear. "I've long looked forward to meeting you. I'm very honored to do business with Celestial Pearl Pharmacy." A hoarse voice sounded from the mirror as a middle-aged man with messy red hair appeared. "You are?" Han Shuo immediately put all his attention on the person. He could not detect the aura of this person through the magical mirror and therefore could not determine his strength. "I'm Lehi. I'm currently in the Light Dominion." The red-haired middle-aged man briefly introduced himself before he put on a big smile and said, "I have full confidence that Celestial Pearl Pharmacy will produce quality products. As long as you agree, we can begin our cooperation right away. Baum can hand you the first batch of payment immediately. Brian, if you agree, I can deliver you Lehi's 500,000 black crystal coins right now. Here, this list. All that you need to do is deliver me the medicines written here." Interrupted Baum as he handed Han Shuo a long list of medicines. Han Shuo took just one glance at the little piece of paper and took no time to notice that most of the medicines listed were illegal substances. If Baum, the city lord of Ethereal City, cooperated with him on the transaction, there shouldn't be any problem for Han Shuo in Ethereal City. It seemed as though no harm could come out of the deal. However, Han Shuo did not immediately accept the business proposal. Instead, after smilingly receiving the list from Baum, he replied, "I will not take the crystal coins for now. I need to ask my pharmacists if they could get me the medicines on the list. We will talk again if they think they could do it." Lehi seemed rather surprised, as though he did not expect Han Shuo to be such an overly careful person, to be so cautious even when there seemed to be nothing for Han Shuo to lose and everything to gain. As he looked at Han Shuo in a somewhat baffled manner, he asked, "Given the ability of Celestial Pearl Pharmacy, you are definitely capable of producing the medicines on the list. Baum is the city lord of Ethereal City. Do you have any other worries?" "Well, not really. It's just that I have too few pharmacists over here. I'm not sure if I can produce the medicines on time, even with 500,000 black crystal coins. That's why I need to communicate with them first," replied Han Shuo politely as he provided a fair excuse. Lehi thought for a moment before he nodded and smilingly said, "Very well, I like your approach at doing business. You have a sense of responsibility to your customer. All right, I look forward to hearing good news from you." Lehi then cut off the telemeeting. Baum did not say any other things regarding the transaction, but talked about some random, irrelevant things with Han Shuo before he took his leave. Chapter 829, Dirty Thoughts GDK 829. Dirty Thoughts. Han Shuo was finally reunited with Han Mu and Han Shui. He was between laughter and tears. He learned about Han Mu's misdeeds from Han Shui, and especially when Han Mu rebutted by saying that he had inherited the excellent trait of his. Han Shuo thought that he was excellent at sex, but after hearing about Han Mu's accomplishments, he immediately felt that he paled in comparison. Han Shuo did not know if he should be glad or angry about it. "From now on, you better exercise more self-control so you don't create even many troubles. Also, don't touch ladies that you should not, those young ones especially. They usually don't have a rational mind." And Han Shuo lectured Han Mu on and on. Han Mu was sitting upright and still with his head slightly lowered as though he was ashamed of his misdeeds. In his mind, however, he completely disagreed with Han Shuo's lecture. He secretly piqued at Rose as he thought, "You ask me to exercise self-control while you bring a beauty by your side to satisfy your urges. How hypocritical." The body of the 5 elite zombies contained Han Shuo's blood essences. They were all produced by him, and he knew exactly what they were thinking. When Han Shuo noticed that Han Mu was having dirty thoughts about him and Rose, and that it was getting more and more explicit, Han Shuo suddenly turned angry. He shouted, "You perverted bastard, what the hell are you thinking? I do not have that kind of relationship with Rose." Rose was there for amusement, and she found it very interesting that Han Shuo would be lecturing his son. She was shocked by that sudden furious shout of Han Shuo's, and she was no longer amused. Her face immediately turned dark, and she started glaring at Han Mu. I forgot that father can read what I'm thinking." Hanmu scratched his head embarrassingly. He hastily apologized to Rose. I'm sorry, so sorry. Although I know my father well enough that he would have done something, I shouldn't have imagined the two of you getting it on. Sorry. Please don't be angry. You have a filthy mind. Rose turned even more furious, stood up from her seat, and shouted. I have been beside him for so many years, but he had never done anything inappropriate to me. You need to get your disgusting brain cleansed? How is that possible? Han Mu was astonished. He looked at Han Shu and mumbled for a moment before he asked in a low voice, Father, have your ability in that aspect waned because you have too many women? Han Mu then scratched his head puzzlingly and thought aloud, but that shouldn't be possible. Father is fantastic at that. He should be able to handle more. Rose was embarrassed and livid. She cursed under her breath and left with a red face. Young fella, getting more and more unruly, aren't you? Han Shu grew furious after hearing Han Mu's offensive words. He angrily shouted, You are grounded. From now on, you are not allowed to leave a step from Celestial Pearl until you've learned your lesson. What? New, there aren't any decent-looking beauties in the pharmacy. Even the only good-looking one belonged to Father. How am I going to live? When Han Mu heard that he was going to be grounded, he immediately started to plead pitifully. He repeatedly claimed that he will listen to Han Shu's words and will not mess around anymore. Han Hao, you will watch over him. Han Shu instructed Little Skeleton. He knew that he must not be lenient to the stubborn little womanizer. Han Hao nodded coldly and cast his emotionless eyes at Han Mu before saying, You better behave yourself. Han Mu knew that Han Shu was very loving and merciful to him and his brother, and therefore wasn't particularly afraid of Han Shu. Little Skeleton, however, had been leading and disciplining them since they started out in the netherworld, and Little Skeleton had been strict towards them. Therefore, he was more afraid of Little Skeleton than Han Shu. Han Mu immediately turned silent after reprimanded by Han Hao. He turned to Han Shui, Han Tu, and the others with pity-looking eyes, hoping that they will plead for him. Han Mu's brothers, especially Han Shui, however, were all wearing schadenfreude smiles. After lecturing Han Mu, Han Shuo took a deep breath and calmed his mind. He politely asked Little Skeleton, How did your trip go? I went to the leader of a godhunter faction living in the Fringe who has good relations with Baum. He has promised me to get McKinley's divine body from Baum. Rest assured, Father. Although that person is greedy and puts personal profit before everything, he is very capable. Given that he dared to accept my money, he must have certainty in delivering his promise. Replied Han Hao. That's great. If we can get our hands on McKinley's divine body, the ethereal city is gonna have a new city lord. I originally planned to leave for the Fringe as soon as all of you are present. But now, I think we'll wait and see, said Han Shu smilingly. Father, what are you going to the Fringe for? Asked the surprised Little Skeleton. It was then that he first learned of Han Shu's destination. As there were no outsiders with them, Han Shuo openly informed them of his plans. He also told them that his family clan was being ousted in the City of Shadows, and they needed to evacuate the city eventually. After listening to the whole story from Han Shuo, Little Skeleton pondered silently for a moment before he suggested, Father, if you'd like to stay in the City of Shadow, we can go there with you and help you kill those people. Given Father's strength, and with our assistant, taking down the entire City of Shadows should be no problem. Hell yeah, City of Shadows or Hushville, we ain't afraid of them. Han Hu immediately agreed. He shouted, That dotard called Walla SS is courting death. We might as well go there and kill them all, then Father will be the city lord of the City of Shadows. After hearing Han Hao and Han Hu's words, the other little fellas immediately voiced their agreement. It appeared that after all these years on Elysium, they have become more and more combative. Han Shu forced a smile and shook his head. He explained, That won't work. Although Wallace is wary of me, I'm still good friends with other members of the Saint family. I cannot betray them. Also, Little Water and Little Wood won't be able to live in the Darkness Dominion because of the energy they cultivate. After taking a short pause, Han Shu put on a faint smile and continued, But most importantly, I feel that the City of Shadows is just a little too small. Our House of Han needs a much bigger space to grow. The Fringe is much bigger than the City of Shadows and Ethereal City. It is also filled with powerful experts. That is the place where the House of Han should be. The 5 elite zombies smiled and nodded after listening to Han Shuo's explanation, while Han Hao remained silent but his eyes started glinting. Okay, Han Hao nodded. All right, now that the 5 of you are finally reunited, go underground and practice the penta-elemental undead formation. Han Shuo instructed the 5 elite zombies. The penta-elemental undead formation could exponentially increase the firepower of the 5 elite zombies. The power unleashed by the formation will also get stronger as their strengths improved. The 5 had obtained a significant improvement in strengths during the last 50 years. Han Shuo believed that the current penta-elemental undead formation should have no problem killing a high god. 10 days went by. While Han Shuo was cultivating, through his demon general, he suddenly discovered that Baum was receiving a high god. With one thought, Han Shuo summoned Little Skeleton, who was training the 5 elite zombies deep underground. When Han Hao surfaced and entered the gymnasium, Han Shuo immediately started describing to him the appearance of the high god. He is a henchman of Polo. He must be there for McKinley's divine body, said Little Skeleton confidently after hearing a description of the person. Han Shuo was elated. He smilingly exclaimed, "Finally!" before he gathered all his attention and carefully monitored the activities in the city lord's manor. As soon as the person stepped into the manor, he was summoned to meet in Baum's secret chamber. The secret chamber had layers upon layers of defensive boundaries, among which was space edict boundaries that were beyond miraculous. It would be impossible to sneak inside without being detected, even with a demon general refined from a high god soul. However, it doesn't worry Han Shuo, for he knew that the high god will be carrying McKinley's divine body. The high god will eventually exit the secret chamber and leave the manor house. If he carried McKinley's divine body, he could follow the high god using the demon general. After observing for a moment, through the demon general, Han Shuo sensed an intense space-time fluctuation coming from the secret chamber. Evidently, Baum had ripped apart space-time in the secret chamber, perhaps withdrawing McKinley's divine body from a space-time fissure. Han Shuo had searched the manor house using his demon generals many times before, but had discovered no sign of McKinley's divine body. After thinking about it, Han Shuo guessed that Baum might have hidden the divine body in a space-time fissure in another dimension. As a cultivator of the Edict of Space, this would be the most secure way of storing things. And the fact proved that Han Shuo's guess was spot on. A moment later, the space-time fluctuation gradually died down, and around 10 minutes later, that high god henchman of Polo's came out with a massive bag. He quietly left the house through the back door. Baum, behind the windows of the highest floor of the highest building, stood silently as he watched the person leave his manor. From his face, it appeared as though he was somewhat worried. He will exit the city right away. There are energy towers of Baum's everywhere. We cannot take the body directly. Let's exit the city as well, Han Shuo said to Little Skeleton. Father, we cannot kill that person. If he is dead, Polo will know that I did it. Also, there is honor among god hunters. Besides, when we join the Fringe in the future, Polo will be a useful asset to have, said Little Skeleton as he looked at Han Shuo. Han Shuo was amazed. He chuckled and said, "Haha, look at you, so mature and thinking. Of all my kids, you are the only one that can let me sleep peacefully at night." Those words of Han Hao proved that he was a prudent person. It seemed that it wasn't by luck that Little Skeleton became so successful in the world of god hunting over in the Death Dominion. It was a son like him that could make Han Shuo feel at ease. He thought that in the future, he should delegate some important tasks to Little Skeleton. "Don't worry, Father, I will make sure to teach them well." Little Skeleton seemed somewhat embarrassed after receiving praise from Han Shuo. He made a somewhat awkward, faint smile. It was much like the smile that Han Shuo wore in the usual days. Chapter 830, The Wrath of an Overgod, GDK 830. The wrath of an overgod, that henchman of Polo seemed very uneasy. And as soon as he exited Ethereal City, he put on a stern face and whistled. Then, a dozen or more shadows flew out from the dense forest around him and surrounded him in no time. The henchman of Polo's then solemnly handed the enormous bag to one of those who appeared. He said in a heavy voice, "For some reason, I feel that something isn't quite right." "Lord Kodiak, you are being overly cautious," one of the god hunters flattered. He said smilingly, "Should we return to base right away?" Kodiak nodded and replied, "I have left a message in the city. Han Hao should come to us after he received it. Everyone be extra careful, this body is worth 2 million black crystal coins. It took me a great deal of persuasion to get the body from Baum. We cannot afford to make any mistakes." The god hunter smilingly said, "I doubt anyone is going to try to rob this soulless body from us." "Don't be so sure." Kodiak furrowed his brows and suddenly turned to gaze behind him. Little Skeleton, or Han Hao, did not conceal his form and aura. He had deliberately done so that Kodiak could sense his presence. Han Hao slowly walked to the party and threw a large sack of black crystal coins in front of Kodiak. He said, "That's the rest of the black crystal coins. Now give me the divine body." Kodiak heaved a breath of relief when he saw that the comer was Han Hao. He saluted Han Hao in the etiquette of god hunters and smilingly said, "Hello, you must have received my message." He then turned his eyes to the bag of black crystal coins under his feet and put on a troubled smile. He said, "It is true that the divine body is for you, but my chief had instructed us to bring the body back to base. Do you mind making a trip with us?" Han Hao shook his head, walked straight towards the god hunter who was carrying McKinley's divine body and took it from him. Then, in an indifferent voice, he said to Kodiak, "Go back. Tell Polo that I have the body and you have received all the crystal coins. The transaction has been concluded, right here, right now." Upon finishing those words, without even giving them another look, Han Hao started leaving with McKinley's divine body. The god hunter who had been flattering Kodiak put on a grimace and asked, "Is this going to be a problem?" "Let's check if there are enough black crystal coins." Kodiak immediately crouched and opened the bag under his feet after Han Hao left. After counting for a moment, he put on a faint smile and remarked, "All the crystal coins, indeed. This Han Hao guy is really straightforward and efficient at doing things. Let's go, we will return to base and inform Lord Polo of it. I think his lordship won't be angry at us, as we are already outside of Ethereal City." Inside a rocky valley outside of Ethereal City, Han Hao put down the enormous bag and started unraveling it. After tearing away layers of animal skin, a crystal coffin was revealed. It contained a person that seemed to be deep asleep. The body, however, has no soul. This special coffin has been preserving McKinley's body and kept it in an active and functional state. "How considerate of Baum," said Han Shuo smilingly as he put his hand on the crystal coffin. After putting all his focus and sensing for a moment, he continued, "Baum has placed a unique tracer on it. Fortunately for us, we are not in Ethereal City. Otherwise, he will be able to sense it when we place a finger on the coffin." As Han Shu spoke, he inserted a stream of demonic yuan into the crystal coffin. A dark string started moving around McKinley's divine body, slowly eating away the tracer that Baum left on McKinley. After a while, Han Shu withdrew his hand. He took out the holy grail that housed McKinley's divine soul. I can sense it. After thousands and thousands of years, I finally sense myself again." An intense fluctuation came from the grail before Han Shu could even speak. McKinley at this moment could not be more emotional. The holy grail that housed his soul started to glisten brilliantly. The divine body in the crystal coffin was his. It was only natural that McKinley could instantly sense his own body from such a short distance. He was so excited that he was talking incoherently. It was easy to see why McKinley would be so excited to have his body back after living in the Dayless prison for tens of thousands of years. Then, a faint, blurry shadow started to slowly float out from the Holy Grail. Han Shuo had removed the energy in the Grail that imprisoned McKinley's soul prior to this. McKinley could fly out from the Grail without any obstruction. After McKinley's soul flew out from the Holy Grail, he slowly floated towards the crystal coffin. He fused into the coffin smoothly like a drop of water falling into the sea. Then, a violent space-time fluctuation came from the crystal coffin. Soft cracking noise sounded as hairline cracks started growing on the coffin. A tinge of healthy red gradually appeared on McKinley's old and pale body as an aura of life started emanating from the body. The crystal coffin contained an elderly man with gray-white hair. He had a pair of long white brows that touched his cheeks. Although the man was old, his skin and flesh were not at all loose. It even seemed as firm and powerful as that of a young man. When the aura of life reappeared on the divine body, Han Shuo noticed that the body started to rapidly transform. Gradually, his cheeks turned redder, and his muscles firmed up as the cracks on the coffin grew larger and denser. His eyes started rolling around underneath his shaking eyelids. Then, suddenly, McKinley opened his bright and deep eye. The crystal coffin shattered with a loud bang. McKinley stretched his body and moved his arms, legs, and head all around excitedly. He was involuntarily screaming, "Oh yeah, I'm back. I'm finally back. Baum Jayal, you better watch out, I'm coming for you. Wahahaha." Han Shu and Little Skeleton stood together as they watched McKinley celebrate his revival by screaming and dancing. It wasn't surprising that McKinley would be so ecstatic to regain freedom after being trapped for so long. Now that McKinley's divine soul and divine body were reunited, he had regained his full strength. He was no longer just a powerless soul that can be kicked around but a proud, mighty high god. A long while later, McKinley finally calmed down somewhat. He laughed heartily as he went to give Han Shu a big hug. He jumped up and down as he said, thank you so much, Brian. I still cannot believe that you have actually got me my body back. How am I ever going to repay you for your help?" Han Shu felt uncomfortable from head to toe being hugged so tightly by a gay old man. He struggled free from McKinley and smilingly said, "Now that you have regained your body, tell me, how do you plan on getting your revenge? If you want to, I can help you with killing Baum. We can go to the city right away." The position of the city lord of Ethereal City rightfully belonged to McKinley. After Baum is dead, McKinley should retake his rightful role. Han Shuo's friendship with McKinley went much deeper than with Baum. If McKinley became the city lord of Ethereal City, it would be tremendously helpful to his future development. "I can make space divine devices for you. You know, I'm very good at this. Interplanar transportation matrices, magical mirrors, any divine devices you need, I can make them for you," pledged McKinley in a big smile. Space divine devices were very rare on Elysium. They cannot be forged by any average alchemist. For this reason, divine devices of the Space Edict were invaluable. It was not unusual for a person with an insane amount of black crystal coins to be unable to find a suitable Space Edict expert who would produce them the divine device they wanted. McKinley was near the pinnacle in the cultivation of the Space Edict energy. He must be a true expert at producing space divine devices, or he wouldn't have made that promise to Han Shu. And coincidentally, Han Shu could really use those divine devices. Han Shu could not be happier to hear those words, and he smilingly replied, "That'd be wonderful. I need to make a trip to the space shrine and inform the overgod of my ordeal. As for killing Baum, I can't do that just yet. Baum is the current city lord of Ethereal City. No matter what he did, I must consult with the overgod before doing anything to him. But once I have his lordship's permission, I can immediately come back to kill Baum," said McKinley. Han Shuo understood McKinley's concerns. He nodded and replied, "No problem. I'll be at the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy in Ethereal City. You can find me there after you have consulted with the overgod." The shrine of the overgod of space must be located in some secret location somewhere in the Space Dominion. It was needless to say that McKinley, a receiver of the divine seal from the space overgod, should know where it was hidden. Before leaving, McKinley repeatedly thanked Han Shuo and promised to look for him after he gave the overgod of space an account of his ordeal, and to reward him by making some commonly used space divine devices. He seemed rather embarrassed that he had to leave so soon. After being repeatedly hastened by Han Shuo, McKinley finally said goodbye. He ripped a fissure in space-time, walked into it, and disappeared. "Father, do you think that he will succeed?" Little Skeleton seemed a little skeptical. Baum has served as the city lord of Ethereal City for such a long time, and he would have become closer with the overgod. Would the overgod believe McKinley's words? Who knows, but McKinley seemed very confident. Perhaps he has some hidden aces under his sleeves, replied Han Shuo after thinking for a moment. 2 days later, Han Shuo and Han Hao had returned to Ethereal City. Han Shuo was examining Metal Elite Zombie's condition when he was suddenly jolted. He noticed that the entire Ethereal City seemed to be shaking. Moments later, Han Shuo received yet another shock. Through the demon general he used for surveilling Baum, he saw that the entire city lord's manor had suddenly been shrouded in a violent spacetime fluctuation. The spacetime fluctuation carried an unparalleled amount of power. It pulverized the entire manor house in a moment. "Nu, spare me, my overlord!" Baums could be heard shrieking miserably from the center of the manor. Several hundred spatial edge appeared out of thin air and sliced at Baum. He was obliterated in a snap. Not a cry was heard, and not one bit of Baum remained. A great stab of pain spread in Han Shuo's consciousness. In the next instance, Han Shuo discovered that the demon general he placed in the manor had also been annihilated. The final scene that the demon general transmitted was a manor that had been razed to the ground. Not a single soul survived in the vast city lord's manor. Chapter 831, McKinley GDK 831. McKinley, the destruction of the city lord's manor, came as a big surprise to everyone. Not only that all the divine guards were killed, even Baum the city lord was obliterated along with his house. All of that took place in just a few moments. That demon general Han Shuo placed in the manor for surveilling Baum was also destroyed by the violent spacetime fluctuation. If an immaterial being like the demon general could not survive the attack, needless to say, a normal living being won't stand a better chance. The people of Ethereal City sank into great fear after the manor house, and all its occupants were reduced to waste. They wondered if they should continue to live in the city. The few small family clans that lived nearby the manor house also observed the manor houses, raising almost as clearly as Han Shuo's demon general did. The last words that Baum screamed before his obliteration were spread widely throughout the Ethereal City. All of the city populace knew that it was the over-god himself who had laid waste to the house. They wondered what Baum did so wrong that the space over-god would unleash his wrath on him. The populace of Ethereal City was horror-stricken and worried about their own safety. Many shops and businesses were temporarily closed. Those who recently came from the other dominions dared not stay in Ethereal City and hastily evacuated from the city. The overgod had scared the living shit of every god in Ethereal City with a single gesture of his wrath. The few companies of divine guards who were not killed in the incident remained in the city and continued to perform their duty as order keepers. Although every one of them was deeply frightened, fearing that the overgod's wrath might land on them at any moment, they did not try to leave. They knew that the might of an overgod was too great to run from, and especially when it's from the overgod of space. All of them knew that if the space overgod wanted them dead, there was no way that they'd live, no matter where they run or hide. They thought that their best option was to stay in Ethereal City and wait for the space overgod's judgment. No one in the city had any idea what caused that to happen, other than Han Shuo, who had some vague ideas. He knew that McKinley must have been to the space shrine and reported his ordeal to the space overgod. However, even Han Shuo did not know what McKinley actually said to the space overgod, or how McKinley persuaded him that he would kill Baum so decisively. And of course, Han Shuo did not leave the Ethereal City out of concern for his safety. His Celestial Pearl Pharmacy was the only few shops that opened for business as usual, as though nothing significant had happened. Han Shuo asked his pharmacist to continue to produce the commonly used medicines, especially those that had been sold out recently. Han Shuo believed that McKinley, who was meeting the overgod of space, will return to Ethereal City soon. And as Han Shuo had expected, 5 days later, without any notice, McKinley stepped into the Ethereal City most pompously. McKinley was a famous character in Ethereal City before he went missing. He had returned to the city at a time where everyone was on tenterhooks. Not only that, he came representing the space overgod, carrying a divine decree bestowed by the space overgod. The populace of Ethereal City, and even in other parts of the space dominion, were frightened, for they did not know who's the next person that the space overgod will take his anger on. Although many were surprised by McKinley's return, many more were calmed. The leaders of the few companies of divine guards that survived, after seeing the divine decree, which proved that the space overgod had assigned McKinley as the new city lord, unanimously accepted him as their city lord with no objection. McKinley's arrival was like a tranquilizer being injected into the Ethereal City that was starting to show disorder. Holding the divine decree from the space overgod, McKinley publicly announced that Baum had colluded with god hunters and of other crimes. He also stated that Baum, and all those divine guards who died in the manor house, had betrayed the principles of Ethereal City, and they received the punishment they deserved. He went on great length to justify Baum's execution. And finally, McKinley, on behalf of the Space Over God, announced that Ethereal City shall function as it previously was, that the Overgod had no intention of meddling with trifle matters about the city, and he will not look into the crimes previously committed by any other person. Without the slightest bit of obstruction, with the Space Overgod's divine decree, McKinley became the new Ethereal City Lord. All the divine guards of Ethereal City pledged their allegiance to McKinley. They even publicly condemned Baum for his heinous crimes. As McKinley was very busy with the affairs of running Ethereal City, he did not immediately look for Han Shuo. After making the public announcement and obtaining the allegiance from the divine guards, McKinley designated a private manor previously owned by Baum as the new City Lord's manor. He then met with the patriarchs of all major family clans and the leaders of all major businesses in the city. It was after Ethereal City had finally stabilized that he came to Celestial Pearl Pharmacy. Han Shuo was somewhat surprised by McKinley. He seemed to have improved in his realm during the short period they were apart. Not only that McKinley seemed to be in much greater spirits, but he was also brimming with an unusual sort of vitality. After observing for a moment, Han Shuo discovered that the McKinley now had become even more powerful than Baum. It appeared that McKinley must have been bestowed with something by the Overgod during his time in the Space Shrine. Otherwise, there was no way that his strength would improve by such a huge margin in such little time. "McKinley, did you receive something wonderful in the shrine?" asked Han Shuo smilingly after he sized up McKinley. McKinley put on a big smile but did not reply. Instead, he started walking and looking around the Celestial Pearl Pharmacy as pleased as Punch. After a while, he remarked, "Damn, that Baum is really willing to part with his capital. I originally planned on finding you a new shop lot, but now that doesn't seem necessary. This is an excellent location and it's well renovated. I doubt I could do better than this." Then, after they were further in the shop, McKinley said to Han Shuo apologetically, "About things that took place in the shrine, I'm not at liberty to talk about it. You have learned about what happened at the previous City Lord's manor, right?" "Yeah, everyone in the city has been talking about the Flatten Manor. Of course I would have heard of it. You are pretty resourceful, aren't you? You managed to get Baum killed without lifting a finger," said Han Shuo smilingly. McKinley, who had recently enjoyed a string of fortuitous events, seemed as though he could not be happier. He replied, "That was only because he deserved it, and the position of the City Lord rightfully belonged to me. I'm just taking back what is mine, hee. Brian, I have promised you to make you some space divine devices. Have you thought about it? Which kind do you need?" "I don't need offensive ones. I just need tools that will allow long-distance meetings, devices like magical mirrors. Oh, and if it's possible, please make me a transportation matrix. I could really use them," replied Han Shuo after thinking for a moment. Han Shuo also knew how to refine devices, especially those with deadly firepower. However, he had no idea how to make transportation matrices and long-range communication devices. "Sure, absolutely no problem," replied McKinley immediately. He then earnestly asked Han Shuo to live in Ethereal City. Han Shuo was wary of agreeing to such requests after the friction with Wallace at the City of Shadows. Although he seemed to have a great relationship with McKinley and Han Shuo had saved McKinley's life, there was no telling if McKinley would still be so kind if there comes a day that their interests conflicted. But most importantly, just like the Darkness Dominion, the Space Dominion was a territory of an Overgod. Even though McKinley was the City Lord of Ethereal City, he must still obey the commands of the Space Overgod. As Han Shuo was not a cultivator of the Space Edict, it was impossible for him to be the City Lord of Ethereal City. And if the Space Overgod, for whatever reason, wanted to kill him, there wouldn't be much that Han Shuo could do. After having witnessed Baum's annihilation through his demon general, Han Shuo became very wary towards an Overgod. He knew that at this point in time, before amassing sufficient strength, he better not risk offending any of the Overgods. "You really don't want to live in Ethereal City?" McKinley seemed very disappointed. He continued to persuade, the ethereal city could really use talents at this time. And if you would live in the city, given your strength, ethereal city will become the strongest city in the space dominion. In fact, I'm willing to govern the city with you. I can assure you that what happened to you in the City of Shadows will not happen here. After all, I wouldn't be living if it wasn't for you. McKinley seemed sincere as he said those words. It seemed that he really wanted Han Shu to stay. However, Han Shu knew that the real city lord of Ethereal City is the space over God. Besides, Han Shu had other plans for his future. Therefore, he politely refused McKinley's invitation. He said, I really don't plan on living in Ethereal City, but don't worry, I'll make sure to come by often. Haha. Right, please keep an eye on my Celestial Pearl Pharmacy while I'm away. Rest assured, nothing will go wrong with your Celestial Pearl branch in Ethereal City, pledged McKinley immediately. What are the special materials you need for producing the Space Edict devices? Tell me, and I'll help you collect them. With the presence of Goldstone trading, it was possible to get hold of most unique materials for refining divine devices. This you don't have to worry. I have plenty of materials stored in my own storage area in the city. I have also discovered a small dimensional storage spacebaum set up in his manor containing precious materials. I have more than enough material. Give me a year, and I'll make you all the most miraculous Space Edict divine devices. McKinley put on a faint smile and continued. However, for the transportation matrix, you'll need to select a special region. I don't think that you have found a good place for it yet, so we'll wait. Well then, many thanks. I'll come to look for you in Ethereal City after 1 year, replied Han Shu. Brian, why so hurry in leaving? Can't you stay just a while longer? McKinley seemed sad when it seemed from Han Shu's tone that he will leave right away. My son was injured. I need to settle the debt with the person who did it, said Han Shu as his face turned cold. When he recalled that Metal Elite Zombie was nearly killed, he felt an urge to skin the attackers alive. Now that the 5 elite zombies were reunited and McKinley's matter had been resolved, Han Shu did not want to tarry any longer. He was ready to head into the fringe. Chapter 832, An Unexpected Pleasant Surprise, GDK 832. An unexpected pleasant surprise, Han Shu had hired a capable and trustable manager to manage his Celestial Pearl branch in Ethereal City. Han Shu believed that McKinley, new city lord of Ethereal City, will look after his pharmacy in the city while he was away. He also doubted that there will be an issue with Metal Elite Zombies Goldstone trading enterprise. With everything prepared, Han Shu, with Han Hao, Rose, and the 5 elite zombies, left Ethereal City and headed for the Fringe, the land of chaos. After Han Hao learned about Metal Elite Zombie getting injured, he asked him for a detailed recount of the raid. However, Han Hao also had no idea who the attacker was. It turned out that, although Han Hao knew the leaders of Godhunter factions in the Fringe, just like Han Shu, he didn't know much about the Fringe either. After all, Godhunters weren't the only power that dwelled in the Fringe. The most powerful and wicked experts that the Elysium could offer were living there. Han Shu and his party possessed decent strength. Han Shu, Han Hao, and Rose were high god, while the 5 elite zombies all possessed miraculous abilities. With that, they were able to travel fast. It took them just a few days to make some significant distance from Ethereal City. Few days after they began their journey, Han Shu and the party arrived at the fort where Han Mu and Han Shui were previously surrounded. The gods in the fort seemed shocked by Han Mu's reappearance. Their gazes towards Han Mu were filled with caution and wariness, as though afraid that Han Mu might do something malicious to them or their loved ones. The fuck you look at me for? You wouldn't have to worry about me if you'd spend as much attention on your girlfriends. Han Mu couldn't help but curse when he saw that all those on the streets were looking at him nervously. Han Shu couldn't help himself but laugh. He previously thought that Han Mu wasn't that influential of a person, but Han Shu now realized he was wrong. He was very amazed that all those gods who had girlfriends or wives seemed so afraid of Han Mu. He softly asked, "You little brat, it seems that you have made yourself a lot of enemies, haven't you?" "Hee, they are just being overly cautious," said Han Mu in a smirk. Then he turned to Han Shui and said, "Little water, what are you worrying about? With father and elder brother here, no one will be stupid enough to try to catch me. They wouldn't throw their lives away." All those ladies you slept with are nutcases. If they decided to come after you without any regard for their lives, are you really going to kill them? Rebuked Han Shui impolitely after he glared at Han Mu. Han Mu stared blankly for a moment after hearing those words. He thought for a moment and immediately came to his senses. Han Mu put on a grimace and said to Han Shui, "Father, I think we should rush." What little water said made sense. Those crazy bitches might really come after me without regard for their own lives, and I don't think I would kill them. We should avoid them or it'll get really troublesome. Han Shui was stunned. He thought that this little scoundrel of his really knew how to make trouble for himself. But in any case, with almost every god in the fort looking at them strangely, Han Shui did not want to stay in the fort for long either. He agreed to Han Mu, and they hastily left the fort. Soon after Han Shui and his party left the fort, 4 ladies arrived at the area where Han Mu traveled through. They were of different ages, but all of them looked extraordinarily beautiful. They looked all around while loudly crying for Han Mu, and of course, they cursed him for being cruel and heartless. Shortly after, the 4 ladies noticed each other. They started a 4-way mouth fight shamelessly in the public, insulting and swearing at each other. But when they learned that Han Mu had just left the fort, they immediately stopped humiliating themselves and flew in the direction that Han Shui and Han Mu left. "What the fuck, kid, just how many loose ends do you have?" Han Shui put on a grimace after hearing the high-pitched cries coming from the fort. He then said to the party, "Let's move a little faster lest they catch up." Hurry up," hastened Han Mu. He flew at the front of the party as though he was very afraid of getting caught. After they were some distance from the fort, Han Hao went to the front to lead the party. They flew through many vast forests rapidly. After 2 days, Han Hao suddenly stopped at an enormous waterfall. A constant torrent of water poured over a rocky ledge and roared straight down into a deep pool far below. The water was then led away through many small meandering streams. Han Shui let out a soft cry upon seeing the waterfall. He turned into a blurry white shadow and shot into the waterfall as though a fish that was jumping into the sea. As a cultivator of the water energy, Han Shui would feel uncomfortable from head to toe if he doesn't surround himself with water every once in a while. As it wasn't easy to come across such a clean and refreshing waterfall, there was no way that he won't jump in for a relaxing bath. Han Tu and Han Hu didn't like water. They stood on a tree near the waterfall and gazed down at them. Rose, Han Mu, and Han Jin went to the smooth walls of the waterfall, reached out with their hands to get some water and cleaned their faces. After leading the party to this waterfall, Han Hao said to Han Shui, "Father, my gang is over here. I'll go talk to them." "Okay," replied Han Shui as he nodded. Han Hao turned into a trail of light, flew through the falling water, and landed in the dark cave behind the waterfall. The few god hunters who had been gazing at Han Mu, Han Shui, and the others like a tiger stalking its prey immediately came forward. That fierce-looking, scar-faced man asked, "Is it you, Chief?" Han Hao did not reply, but released the sinister aura from his body to state his identity. As soon as the god hunter sensed the sinister energy that filled the caves, he bowed and delightedly said, "Chief, it is you." Then, a group of sinister-looking god hunters started exiting from the winding caves and gathered before Han Hao. "Chief, did you purposely lead those people to this waterfall? Do you want to kill them?" As they did not know Han Hao's relationship with Han Shui and the others, and as Han Hao had previously used similar strategies to kill his pursuers and enemies, his henchmen assumed that Han Hao had the same intention as before. Ever since they started serving Han Hao, they had never seen Han Hao met with any friends or families, nor had they ever seen Han Hao being friendly to any person. In their minds, Han Hao was a totally callous and emotionless machine, a true heartless villain. Therefore, it was only natural that they would assume that Han Shui and the others were Han Hao's prey. "They are not prey. They are friends," replied Han Hao, surprising his followers. He pointed at Han Shui and the others and instructed, "Remember their faces. You will not attack them no matter in any circumstances." Understood, these god hunters had never before received any instructions remotely similar to this, or with such gravity. They were all startled, and it took them a while to come to their senses. They repeatedly nodded and indicated that they will obey the command, while wondering Han Shui's and others' identities. "You bunch are no match against them anyway," Han Hao coldly groaned and said. If someday you bumped into them and they wanted to kill you, just tell them that you work for me." After taking a short pause, Han Hao instructed, "Now, you will all return to the Death Dominion and bring the others to the Fringe. We won't haunt the Death Dominion anymore. We are going to the land of chaos." "That's wonderful, Chief. Haha, a place like the Fringe is where we truly belong, and we have long wanted to go there. In that land, we can walk around openly. No one is going to scoff at us just because we are god hunters. Chief, are we going to stay there for the long term?" The malevolent and bulky man seemed overjoyed. God hunters were specifically targeted and hunted by almost every power living in the 12 dominions. The Fringe, however, due to its unique geographical location, was not within the jurisdiction of any overgods. Besides, as most who live in the Fringe were the most depraved of criminals from all over the Elysium, god hunters weren't that big of a deal for the society there. No one would bother eradicating them just because they were god hunters. In fact, they could live pretty much like a normal person in the Fringe and can engage in various businesses openly. For most god hunters and criminals who found it too troublesome to get by in the divine dominions, the land of chaos was a 5-star resort that could refuge them. They can live there comfortably without worrying about getting hunted down by divine guards. But there was one prerequisite: they need to be strong enough to survive in the Fringe. As the Fringe was not ruled by any of the 12 overgods, no divine guards would be there to enforce any laws. It was filled with so many fierce and powerful experts that without sufficient strength, one might lose their life right after stepping into the Fringe. "That's right, we will be living in the Fringe," replied Han Hao noddingly before he said, "Get going already and don't get tarried along your journey. Go back to the Death Dominion and bring the rest of our people over. When you have reached the Fringe, just look for Polo to get hold of me." "We will do as you bid, Chief." The bulky, scar-faced man bowed, led the group of god hunters back into the cave, and left through an exit away from the waterfall. Before they left, they would each take a good look at Han Shuo and the others to firmly remember their faces. After having done instructing his followers, Han Hao walked out from the waterfall and back to Han Shuo's side. Han Shuo smilingly remarked, "Not bad at all. They all seemed callous, calm, and experienced. They even know how to cooperate when traveling around the caves. It seems that they have been very well trained." Han Shuo had observed everything that happened behind the waterfall through his demon generals. "Inside the memory that father left me are some demonic battle formation for team coordination. I have used it on them. With that, they are more united than an average god hunter group and can fight better as a team," replied Little Skeleton. Han Shuo nodded with a smile on his face, and he praised, "Very well done." The fact that Han Hao could accomplish this merely with his memory of demonic arts was yet another evidence that he had truly inherited Han Shuo's understanding of demonic arts. After taking a short pause, Han Shuo asked, "You said that you have more followers in the Death Dominion. How many do you have altogether?" Han Shuo was very interested to know just how many god hunters Little Skeleton had managed to recruit in the past 50 years. 3 companies, which is around 300 people. They were all personally trained by me and know how to fight cooperatively. They are much stronger than the divine guards of an average city," replied Little Skeleton proudly. Han Shuo was elated by that information. He thought, "I Little Skeleton is such a bringer of pleasant surprises." Every one of the god hunters possessed extraordinary strength and was cruel in character. In addition, they know how to fight effectively using demonic combat formations. These troops might even be slightly stronger those divine guards Han Shuo trained using the 8 Desolation and Torment formation. And on top of that, they were 300 gods strong. Han Shuo thought that there could not be a better surprise than this. Chapter 833, End him GDK 833. End him living in the northwest region of